Okay, let me start our next session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Ferraro from Raytheon Technologies, and I'm also a SENEDIA board member. Thank you all for being here this morning. It's my honor to kick off our next panel. So we have a few guests with us this morning. I'll introduce our first one, Ms. Stacy Bostjanick, Department of Defense Chief of Implementation and Policy, Deputy Information Officer for Cybersecurity. Stacy Bostjanick is a member of the Senior Executive Service and serves as a Chief Implementation and Policy, Deputy Chief Information Officer in Cybersecurity, Office of the Chief Information Officer, the DoD. In this position, she serves as the focal point within the DoD CIO to implement Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC, program across the defense industrial base. Stacy, thank you very much. Next guest is Mr. Eric Goldstein, Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. Eric Goldstein serves as Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, as of February 19th, 2021. In this role, Eric leads CISA's mission to protect and strengthen federal civilian agencies and the nation's critical infrastructure against cyber threats. Thank you very much, Eric. Thanks for being with us this morning. Okay, so now it is my distinct honor to introduce, perhaps for the last time during his time in Congress, one of SENEDIA's greatest champions. A leader in Congress who was revered by his colleagues on both sides of the aisle for both the depth of his expertise in public policy and for the good old-fashioned honesty, fairness, and friendliness that defines the way he treats everyone who has the good fortune to work with him. Congressman Jim Langevin. During a distinguished career in public service that has spanned over 3 decades, Congressman Langevin has established himself as one of our nation's preeminent thought leaders on national security policy, rising to the current position as senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, where he serves as chairman of the Subcommittee on Cyber, Innovative Technologies and Information Systems, and as an influential member of the Sea Power and Strategic Forces subcommittees. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, Congressman Langevin has worked tirelessly to accelerate the development and transfer of innovative, new capabilities into the hands of our warfighters. In particular, the Congressman has been an unrelenting advocate for the advancement of directed energy technology, serving as the co-chair of the Congressional Directed Energy Caucus. Likewise, Congressman Langevin is respected around the country as an expert on cybersecurity and was among the first voices in government to bring attention to the seriousness of this matter and called for bringing up the nation's defense against cyber threats. As those in this room know better than most, Congressman Langevin began ringing the bell on cybersecurity years before many Americans were even familiar with the term. And over the years since, his clear-eyed focus on the threat, fierce advocacy in Congress, and dedicated collaboration with industry has been an invaluable service to the nation as we navigate the evolving battle space and develop solutions to ensure America's warfighting capabilities remain second to none for generations to come. Most importantly, as the United States representative for all those who call Rhode Island's 2nd District home, Jim Langevin has always been accessible, reliable, and effective representative to our federal government. Jim, I personally want to tell you that it is an honor to call you my friend. And I'll tell you one, I'll say aspiration I've always had since I've gotten to know Jim. I don't think I've ever shared this with you. And for those of you who have been to his office in Washington, D.C., he has what I started calling his Wall of Fame. And that's pictures of Jim with a number of truly iconic individuals from around the globe. And I've shifted that nomenclature from the Wall of Fame to the Wall of Jim's peers. And I say that because nobody has influenced more lives and community than Jim, as measured by some of the individuals that are pictured with him on his wall. So my aspiration has always been to have a picture with Jim on his Wall of Fame or Wall of Peers. So, not that I've stared at this wall incessantly, but I really have. It's really an inspiration. So I've jotted down, as I was sitting here this morning, some of the people that are on Jim's Wall of Peers, and it includes people like the Pope, the Dalai Lama, Julia Roberts, Bono, Christopher Reeves, Michael J. Fox, and this is all from top of my mind, by the way, President Bush, President Obama, Michelle Obama, and of course, Tim Del Judas. So if you don't mind, Jim, I'm going to keep that as an aspiration to see if I can't influence individuals in the community nearly as much as you have and earn my spot on your wall of peers.
Now he tells me.
From the day you announced your intention to retire from Congress, virtually every conversation I've had where your name has come up has also included a heartfelt comment about the respect you have earned here in Rhode Island and in Washington, and in how big a void you will leave when you leave Congress and the Armed Services Committee. Those comments come from every direction, from leaders in industry, from Democrats and Republicans, in both the House and the Senate. And most importantly, directly from our warfighting community itself. It's a resounding testament to your years of service on behalf of Rhode Island and the nation, and a powerful reminder of the enormous legacy you will leave behind. I hope you will all join me in a warm round of applause and welcome for Congressman Jim Langevin.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for the kind introduction, your kind words, your friendship. It's been great getting to know you over these years, and it's wonderful to be with you here today once again for this conference. Many friends in the room here I'm looking out, and you know, the decision to not seek re-election, as you can imagine, is among the most difficult of my life. But you know, hopefully there's life after Congress, and it doesn't involve getting on an airplane every week to go to work. And I will be involved, and hopefully closer to home is the plan. But it's great to be here today at this conference once again. Thrilled to be on the panel with Eric and Stacy. I appreciate the work that they do, the really important work that they do on cyber and their roles, both at DOD and at CISA. They've been great partners, as well as the teams that they work with, and look forward to a great discussion here with them today. Just a shout out before I begin my prepared remarks to everyone who helped put this conference together. Obviously the great sponsors, Raytheon, General Dynamics, and many other great companies here in Rhode Island and in southeastern New England. It's very important that we put this conference together, and it's held every year. I'm glad that we're back here in person once again. Nice to be seeing people, as Paul mentioned, in person as opposed to just on a video screen. And shout out to Tim Del Judas, my former Deputy District Director, as well as Molly McGee, and again, everybody who had a hand in putting this conference together. So thank you for that. I hope you'll bear with me. I just got back from Europe. I led a Codell over to Italy, and so I'm a little still jet lagged a bit, but doing okay, and really looking forward to our discussion this morning. Obviously, it's great to be with so many friends for another Defense Innovation Days, and I do admit that it's a little sentimental about this being perhaps my final speech to you as a sitting member of Congress, but I really am thrilled to be here during such a crucial moment in world history, one which has wide-ranging implications for the future of our national security. This is particularly prescient, having just come back from leading a Codell with some of my armed services colleagues to Italy, where we met with the head of and the leadership team of 6th Fleet, as well as our base in Sicily at Sigonella, and our ISR assets that we work with down there. And I have to say that it was incredibly eye-opening. So I really mean it when this trip and this conference at this time was very prescient, because it's so eye-opening, the undersea challenges that we face as our enemies and adversaries ramp up their capabilities. And I'll talk a little bit about more of that here, but the work that you do is incredibly important, and it's not a time to let up. We have to double down on the work that both SENEDIA and places like Newark and our undersea war capabilities in particular are working on. The United States and our armed forces, of course, face a myriad of threats from across the globe. And before we discuss how we are confronting those challenges, particularly when it comes to cybersecurity, I'd just like to begin by placing the threat landscape that we face in a kind of a larger context. So on February 24th, as we all know, Vladimir Putin unleashed war upon millions of innocent Ukrainians in pursuit of his deranged expansionist fantasies, trying to restore the old glory of the former Soviet Union. Since that day, the world has watched modern war play out in real time as the Ukrainian people fight to defend their homeland and the very notion of democracy itself. And it really has been incredibly inspiring to watch the Ukrainian people fight for their country, fight for democracy, not willing to just be intimidated by probably in many ways a more capable, more powerful Russia, but they have this fire in their spirit that says that they are not going to be defeated. They're going to fight for their country and fight for democracy. And as someone, by the way, who comes from Ukrainian descent, my great-grandmother, God rest her soul, emigrated to the United States years ago. I'm glad that she's not alive to see what is happening to Ukraine today, but it makes me all the more passionate about supporting the Ukrainian people and seeing them win back their country. Russia has also attacked Ukraine, as we understand, in cyberspace through a variety of different methods, from overloading Ukrainian government web pages with web traffic, to planting destructive malware on Ukrainian systems, to launching cyber attacks against satellite internet providers to cause widespread communications outages, just to name a few. But despite those best efforts, Russia's cyber aggression has not achieved the decisive effect that many outside observers expected that it would. For instance, Russia has not succeeded in disrupting the Ukrainian power grid, something that it did twice in the years after its invasion of Crimea. We also have not seen Russia target American critical infrastructure in retaliation for leading the global effort to sanction Russia's economy and punish Putin's cronies, though that danger certainly remains, and we can't take it for granted that we're out of the woods. This will be a space to monitor carefully, as it will be instructive in demonstrating the role of cyber operations in modern conventional warfare. But despite their setbacks, we'd be foolish, of course, to undermate Russia's ability to wreak havoc in cyberspace. Russia, as we know, has a well-earned reputation for using cyber operations to compromise the critical infrastructure of other nations, interfere in other nations' elections, and recklessly launch destructive malware attacks with widespread global consequences, as we have seen. And perhaps more than any other country, Russia has shown a capability and desire to conduct sophisticated and disruptive cyber operations against its adversaries. So I really do credit the Ukrainian government, as well as our own, for the ongoing work to neutralize Russian cyber threats, but they are not going away anytime soon, and so we must absolutely remain vigilant and at the ready. Meanwhile, I want to say that President Biden, I believe, deserves enormous credit for uniting the international community behind the Ukrainian cause. Together with our allies, we have imposed crushing sanctions on Russia's economy and bankrupted Putin's war machine. We welcomed Finland and Sweden into NATO and the NATO alliance and created a stronger, more united membership than ever before. And in Congress, we maintained rock-solid bipartisan support for Ukraine, providing our allies with substantial military, economic, and humanitarian aid as they fight for their freedom. If Vladimir Putin expected that his invasion of Ukraine would yield a weak, fractured international response, his calculus was dead wrong. Clearly, NATO is stronger than ever. I remember just a few short years ago, we were debating, there was a debate in Congress as to whether or not, why do we have such a big troop presence in Europe? Russia's not a threat anymore. Maybe the troops should be shifted over to the Asia Pacific, stationed in heavier numbers in South Korea. Well, I think that question has been answered. And we know why NATO is so important, and I'm glad that the NATO alliance is stronger than ever before. But Russia is not the only, of course, strategic threat facing the United States. The threat landscape extends far beyond Europe into Asia, where China's global ambitions continue to grow. As we speak, China is working overtime to outpace the United States military-industrial base, quickly moving to develop their arsenal of ships and weaponry, supporting our nation's shipbuilding efforts, including the crucial development of our submarines. Right now, built right here at Electric Boat in Rhode Island, could not be more critically important than it is right now because of these buildups. While China scales up its military capabilities, they're also cultivating economic power and political influence across the globe. Likewise, the Chinese Communist Party has demonstrated its ability to wield its cyber capabilities in support of its widespread, persistent, and aggressive intelligence enterprise, while it's enabled the theft of trillions of dollars of Western technology, trade, and secrets and intellectual property, along with the personally identifiable information of hundreds of millions of individuals, and that should alarm us all. Those who would target us in cyberspace are clearly resourceful, and some threat actors are highly sophisticated, as we were made painfully aware through the SolarWinds breach in 2020, which was later attributed to the Russian intelligence service. But other regional cyber powers such as North Korea and Iran also present serious threats, as do non-state cyber criminal groups and that have perpetrated high-profile cyber attacks against U.S. critical infrastructure as well. The fact is that we will never be able to truly be able to prevent cyber incidents from happening, but the federal government can work hand in glove with the private sector to bolster our collective cybersecurity and reduce the frequency and damage caused by cyber attacks. We've made considerable progress in doing so during my time in Congress, and yet I'll be the first to tell you that we have much, much, much more work to do. So the interconnected nature of American society and the vulnerabilities of the systems and networks on which we rely present a host of opportunities for our adversaries to target. In 2021, Log4j vulnerability was a stark reminder of the security flaws that are hidden in the software underpinning most of our daily digital lives. Moving forward, reshaping the cyber ecosystem towards greater security and closing our aperture of vulnerability must be a priority. We're reminded that the internet was never built with security in mind. We continue to layer cybersecurity on top of that free and open architecture. And too often, there is a rush to be first to market than to be secure to market. And we need to have a better focus on being more secure to market than just being first to market. If we can do that, it'll address a lot of those open doors and windows, if you will, those vulnerabilities from the get-go, and make us more secure in the long run. So I was elected to Congress 22 years ago. Hard to believe that so many years have gone by. I don't know how they flew by so quickly. And less than a year before, of course, the devastating attacks of September 11th. From terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and the Taliban to rogue nations like Iran and North Korea, and now ascendant China and an aggressive Russia. During that time, I've dedicated my career to vanquishing the complex and dynamic set of threats that have confronted our nation. And while we've made progress addressing some of these challenges, others will endure for years to come. After all, these are not easy problems to solve, and the threat landscape before us will only become more and more complicated going forward. So that's part of the reason why I've spent so much time thinking about innovation and what it means to be, and what it means to outcompete our strategic competitors. This is particularly important when it comes to basic science, research, and development, test and evaluation, and it spans the gamut from hypersonics to semiconductors to cybersecurity. Not only must we prioritize these technologies, we need the infrastructure in place to do so. And of course, the people are most important. For example, several years ago, I helped lead the charge to elevate U.S. Cyber Command to a unified combatant command, giving them the resources they need to provide cyber capabilities and accomplish cyberspace missions. This elevation has allowed Cyber Command to ensure unified training to our cyber operators, provide agility for critical time-sensitive operations, and increase the efficiency and interoperability of the cyber mission force, one of our military's greatest assets that are in our arsenal. So my colleagues in Congress and I have also stood up our nation's premier cybersecurity agency the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which serves as the operational lead agency for federal cybersecurity and the national coordinator for critical infrastructure security and resilience. I thank Eric and his colleagues for the work that they are doing. We've created also a joint cyber planning office within CISA and empowered the agency with administrative subpoena authority to identify vulnerable systems and notify the owners of those systems across the public and private sectors. As CISA continues to take on more and more responsibility under Director Jen Easterly's brilliant leadership, we have worked to secure sufficient resources for them to fulfill their critical mission, culminating in a $2.9 billion House-passed budget for fiscal year 23. So preserving this funding in the final appropriations package that we're going to be voting on hopefully in the near future is absolutely essential to our nation's cybersecurity, as is a continued commitment to CISA's growth in future Congresses. And Eric, I hope you'll pass on my respect and my appreciation to your team at CISA. So let me just say this. I'm also incredibly proud to have authored the National Cyber Director Act to establish the National Cyber Director within the Executive Office of the President. If you listen to my speech, and I did put you to sleep last year at SENEDIA's conference last year, then you know that this position is charged with coordinating federal efforts to protect our nation in cyberspace, a vital role that I've worked for 10 years to create. Today, I'm pleased to see so much progress as Director Inglis continues to build out his team. The Office of the National Cyber Director is taking a leading role in addressing challenges related to our nation's cybersecurity workforce, coordinating with federal agencies to implement the requirements of President Biden's executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity and developing the next national cybersecurity strategy, which is soon to come. Another critical body in the federal government's Organization for Cybersecurity is the State Department's new Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, which I was pleased to see them create. The borderless nature of the digital domain means that the U.S. cannot secure itself in cyberspace without vigorous international engagement on core issues like enforcement of norms, capacity building, digital connectivity, international standards development, and digital freedom. Cyber must be a core foreign policy priority for the United States in the 21st century, and a dedicated Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy is a major step forward in that regard. We're in this together, and we need our partners and allies, and we need to be leading on the international front to make sure that, that we're doing this together. The next step, I believe, is for Congress to pass the Cyber Diplomacy Act, enshrining this Bureau into law and ensuring its viability in the coming decades. I say it's important to establish it in law because I don't want to see what happened under the previous administration when cyber at the State Department was gutted to ever happen again by any future administration. It really does need to be enshrined in law. So the Cyber Diplomacy Act of course, is not the only outstanding piece of cybersecurity legislation in this Congress, as you might imagine. The FY23 NDAA also presents a major opportunity to build on the progress of recent years and continue strengthening the work relationship between the federal government and the private sector owners and operators of critical infrastructure, who are often on the front lines defending against cyber attacks. So a key element of that operational partnership is a shared situational awareness of the cyber threat landscape, which I hope to establish with one of my major legislative priorities this year that's still outstanding, and that's the Joint Collaborative Environment, or the JCE. The JCE, which is a recommendation from the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, of which I had a privilege of serving as a commissioner, is intended to improve collaborative cyber threat analytics with participants from both the public and private sector. By providing a common cloud-based tool set for shared real-time cyber threat analysis, JCE will be foundational to establishing closer operational collaboration between the federal government and critical infrastructure partners. So my provision here, creating the Joint Collaborative Environment, passed the House as part of the FY23 NDAA, and I sincerely hope that it will become law before I leave Congress at the end of this term. So such operational collaboration is especially important to foster with the country's most systemically important critical infrastructure entities, those that, if disrupted in a cyber attack, could cause not just only the company, but the entire country to have a very bad day. We don't want that to happen. While these entities are ultimately responsible for the defense and security of the infrastructure under their control, and often have greater capabilities than many other critical infrastructure entities to do so, it's imperative that the U.S. support those efforts. So specifically, I think systemically important entities should be eligible for unique benefits from the federal government, including technical assistance, prioritized participation in CISA's Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, and intelligence warnings and indicators to such entities when they're targeted by malicious actors. So, but given the unique importance of these systemically important entities, the federal government, I believe, should take steps to broaden our visibility into their key dependencies that, if exploited, could constitute a business risk for the entity and a systemic risk for the entire country. So these insights, I believe, would also contribute to national risk analysis and resilience efforts, and could also directly support other efforts, such as the continuity of economy plan required by the FY20 NDAA, which we're waiting for that plan to come out of the White House hopefully very soon. So this year, we're also pushing the Navy. This is a big one because I've been frustrated a little bit, well, we're pushing the Navy to create a dedicated military occupational specialty for cyber. So the Navy currently utilizes its cryptologic warfare community to fill our needs in cyberspace. But the fact is, the Navy is the only service without this dedicated role. And as we all know, cyber is simply just too important to be an add-on to anyone's primary job. We need dedicated professionals with deep backgrounds in cybersecurity to keep our nation safe from harm. So they're moving in the right direction. We're pushing them along, and hopefully that'll be law very soon as well. I also spend quite a bit of time, of course, thinking about these critical cybersecurity issues in my capacity as chairman of the Cyber Innovative Technologies and Information Systems Subcommittee on the House Armed Services Committee. So the next few years are going to be, I believe, particularly decisive for not just cybersecurity challenges, but also for technologies such as 5G, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, semiconductors, and beyond. And I'd really be remiss if I did not also briefly highlight what we're doing here and must continue doing when it comes to other advanced capabilities. So, with respect to semiconductors or microchips, we're frankly, as we all can appreciate now, lagging behind. This makes legislation like the CHIPS and Science Act, which President Biden signed into law after Congress passed it in a bipartisan way this summer, more critical than ever. Historic investments to strengthen supply chains and manufacturing, bolster research and development, and train the workforce of the future are absolutely critical to maintaining technological and economic leadership and preparing for our national security challenges of today and tomorrow. Now, another area we risk falling behind is in hypersonics. Russia has previously deployed hypersonic missiles in Ukraine, and China has reported successful tests of nuclear-capable hypersonic missiles. It is absolutely critical that the United States continue to advance in this space by investing in hypersonic technologies and testing infrastructure. I'm trying to do our best to push us along in that area, and I'm confident that we are making the right progress that needs to be made. But we must also continue to support things like directed energy capabilities, which have made tremendous progress. I know in years past, and I was a child of the Reagan years, and the Strategic Defense Initiative was probably at the time, a bit overhyped, and the technology wasn't there yet. But President Reagan did what presidents should do: challenge our brightest minds, the nation, to meet the challenge and to develop the technologies. And finally, they're reaching that maturity level. For example, we now have a laser mounted on the USS Portland and continue, which is at a 150 kilowatt level, which will scale to about 300 kilowatts. And when you talk about 150 to 300 kilowatt ranges, those power levels actually have utility, not only shooting down planes or drones, but also can have utility for missile defense, for defending the fleet and our troops. This is a big deal and a game-changing technology that is here today. And we also need to continue to invest in critical programs such as the diode-pumped alkali laser. Directed energy technologies will only become more advanced and more critical, and with the right investments will achieve game-changing payoffs in future conflicts that benefits our sailors, the fleet, benefits our our warfighters, and we owe it to them to make sure that we're doing everything we can to mature those technologies as rapidly as possible. Now, artificial intelligence continues to impact nearly every aspect of our lives, whether we know it or not. It's increasing applications for healthcare, transportation, finance, and of course, our national security. AI helps make sense of our most complex data, assisting our decision makers to make the best informed choices with the best information at their fingertips, and supporting our warfighters to both engage the enemy and defend the homeland effectively. AI will become increasingly important as well. So, additionally, quantum technologies are vital to keeping the United States ahead of our competitors' activity in perfecting various quantum-based leap-ahead technologies and information processors. I can tell you this, and I've heard it many times, whoever cracks the quantum first, cracks quantum first, will hold the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, as this technology has the potential to completely change the face of not just our national security, but national security across the globe. Further, our nuclear triad is a critical component to our national security infrastructure, but no discussion of our nuclear triad is complete without acknowledging our extraordinary nation's submarines. We must sustain our dominance undersea by keeping our world-class Columbia-class program on a tight schedule, while also staying on track to procure 2 new Virginia-class submarines each year. Luckily, I can say this, the incredible work that's being done right here in Rhode Island is really nothing short of remarkable. It really is a modern marvel what is being done in building these amazing platforms. For the past 22 years, it has been an absolute honor to represent the thousands of men and women who build our amazing submarines right here in Rhode Island's congressional state, 2nd Congressional District, and I see keep going with that extraordinary work. But I have to tell you, we must also double down on our investments in undersea warfare. I mentioned my trip to Italy, and this conference right now and just getting back was incredibly prescient. Last week, I led the Codel to Italy, where I heard from our operators at Navy's 6th Fleet, whose briefings were incredibly illuminating, if not somewhat alarming. It is abundantly clear that we cannot afford to cede our undersea dominance to adversaries who are investing heavily in their own undersea capabilities, like China or Russia, who is particularly threatening with the ultra-quiet new Severodvinsk submarine. We must be prepared to defend the United States in any domain, especially beneath the sea, which is why research and development work being done by members of SENEDIA and at institutions like Newark are just so vital. I can tell you this, now is not the time to take the foot off the gas pedal. If anything, we need to double down on those efforts. So of course, the most critical component of our mission is the people who carry it out. From the scientists at the workbench to the small business creating critical components to the warfighter in uniform using these technologies on the battlefield, our greatest strength as a country is the incredible, talented, and resourcefulness of our people. But the fact of the matter is, we're lacking quality facilities to support some of our best resources, our brilliant researchers. So we face massive backlog right now, as you have probably heard, in laboratory investment, more than $5.7 billion in the latest report to Congress, just to catch up. So the NDAA, this NDAA cycle, I worked to secure hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding for our nation's laboratories to help fix their crumbling infrastructure. This investment and recapitalization is long, long overdue, and I'm hoping we're going to make a significant dent in it going forward. It's not just the leaky roofs. We also, of course, face enormous challenges within the department in terms of technology development, transition, and adoption. This is not just about innovation and procurement, but also about the department's willingness to invest in potentially game-changing technologies, modernization, and supplementing the facilities and materials needed to develop them and attract and retaining global talent that we depend on. So just as I'm winding up, I know it's been a long speech, but getting to the end here, I just want to highlight that the researchers, engineers, and innovators who apply their talent to meeting this unique challenge of national security should find a Department of Defense that is willing and able to support and bolster their research. I'm also proud of another one of my priorities in this year's NDAA, which creates a competitive annual process to select and properly vet the best scientists from around the world that want to advance the development of critical technologies right here in the United States. We should always be going after the best and the brightest. We need to attract the bright talent to our defense industrial base while simultaneously preventing this talent from working for our adversaries. As co-chair of the Congressional Career and Technical Education Caucus, as well, I'm also well aware of the benefits of CTE programs in students and employers alike, and there are few sectors where these programs are more important than in the defense industrial base. Again, it all comes down to the people. And we are lucky to have a primary example of industry and education working together that we do right here in New England. A prime example of industry and education working together is a robust apprenticeship program and close partnerships Electric Boat has forged with the Community College of Rhode Island, the Westerly Education Center, career and technical education schools, and local high schools as well. Together, they have built a successful pipeline for attracting and developing talented young people that has greatly contributed to our national security. At a time when employers are struggling right now to fill jobs, this is a model that should be replicated wherever and whenever possible. And lastly, I have always believed that we must incentivize a culture within the workforce, and particularly within the leadership, where risk-taking is encouraged in hopes of achieving game-changing payoffs. We like to call this failing forward or smart failure, and it should be encouraged, absolutely should be encouraged. I know it's not always great to fail, but smart failure is important. Private industry is doing this far more quickly than the government, and I see many companies encouraging their workforce to think big, take risks, and learn from their mistakes. I truly believe that if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough. That's the kind of culture we need to instill in the department and, of course, across industry. That's a cultural shift that we need to instill, again, across the board, particularly within government, if we are to see our research and development efforts ultimately succeed. So at the end of the day, our most important asset is and always will be our people. They should always come first. New technologies mean little without taking care of the people that utilize them. So all of these issues that I've discussed today will continue to be my highest priorities as Congress continues to work on the FY23 NDAA. As of today, the House is a bit ahead of the Senate cycle. What else is new, right? But as we are the superior chamber, as we like to say. But we're hopeful that the Senate's version of the bill will come to the floor as soon as possible, allowing us to push these priorities through a conference committee and to the President's desk as soon as possible. To close, I'd like to thank SENEDIA for having me here today. I have to say that looking back, I've spent the better part of my career confronting the challenges of national security and the intricacies of cyber innovation head on. But I have to say that is all of you, the people in this room that have put in the work every day to ensure that we have the right people working on the right problems with all of the right resources. Although this will be my final year in Congress, I certainly look forward to working alongside each and every one of you in this new and new and different capacities for many years to come. With our nation's future in your capable hands, I'm confident that the United States will be well positioned to win in the 21st century. Thank you all very much.
I don't know if I can follow that up. Dog. Well, I do want you to know that we do have some spots for assessors of CMMC when you retire, if you want to help us out there. But I think, the points that you made are extremely important, and one of the things that we can't lose focus on is all of the activities that we're undertaking in CMMC and CISA across the federal government is to secure our nation, right? When we do things to validate that we have the proper controls to protect our information, it's to protect us as a nation, to make sure that we maintain that military superiority. You know, so fortunately or unfortunately, I'm old enough to have a son or daughter that could serve in our armed services. And when I work for the DoD, I do it because I want to make sure that every kid that's out on that battlefield comes home to their parent. They have the best opportunity, and that's what you in this room do for us. And making sure that we keep our intellectual property, that we keep our superiority secure and safe, that's what we have to do. That's why making sure that we have the safeguards and the controls and the requirements in place to protect our data and information is paramount, because we're in a new war, right? It's not the same war that we knew when we were younger, right? Now they're attacking from a different perspective. They're getting into our networks. They're stealing our information and our background and personal information. You know, NDIA did a survey of all their members. 74% said they'd never been hacked. And what do all the cyber geeks say? No, 74% didn't know they'd been hacked, because we've all been hacked, right? So, you know, that's the one thing that I know that it is uncomfortable and difficult to look at these requirements and things that NIST has suggested need to be put in place to protect your intellectual property and your systems and your networks, but we got to get on board with this, right? I keep thinking, one of these days I'm going to get Lee Greenwood's I'm Proud to Be an American, play it in the background as I scream from the mountaintops. You know, we really have to. We've met people there. I don't know, how many of you heard me speak before? I don't want to bore you with the same stories. Okay, so when we first started CMMC, there was a guy that was a welder out in Transcom, and he wanted Miss Arrington to come see him. He wanted to talk to her about this cybersecurity stuff. And she said, you know, before she went out there, they made sure that she had her closed-toed shoes and her protective gear and everything to go out on that welding floor. And she went out there, and the guy was like, ma'am, I don't need no stinking cybersecurity. I'm just a welder. And she said, well, how do you know what you're supposed to weld? And he says, well, they send it to me, right? And what do? They packaged up that entire tech data package, sent it down, and said, you figure out what you need out of this. He had his AutoCAD program up on the same laptop that had his Amazon Delivery Messenger and his Facebook Instant Messenger all on the same laptop, all popping up at different times. And Katie said she recognized the program was an AutoCAD program. She said, hey, can you zoom out on that for me? He had the structural design of one of our top tactical aircraft, totally unprotected. And she said, well, you think maybe our adversaries would like to get a hold of that? And he was like, well, maybe. She said, or how about this? They'd get in, change the tolerances or the levels on those welds, so now your quality goes down. We stop using you because you're a poor performer, and we erode our industrial base. Or, have you guys heard about the cage code issues? Cage code hopping, skipping, and jumping? So another reason to protect yourselves is our adversaries are getting in and stealing your information. I met a guy down in South Carolina. He was a construction contractor. He lost $40,000. And he said, you know, he went back to the government like, hey, when y'all going to pay me? And they're like, we've paid you. And he's like, no, you haven't. Oh, yes, they had. And by the time he'd figured it out, right, so our adversaries had gotten in, or some malicious actor had gotten in, stolen his data, and redirected his payment. And to him, $40,000 was a good chunk of change. To the Department of Defense that was paying him, it was a good chunk of change, and we weren't budgeted for another $40,000 to make him whole. And when he went to try to find somebody to help him out with it, the DOJ said, that's not enough for us to be bothered with. We don't have the resources for it. So he was out of luck with his $40,000. So it's important that we all step up and pay attention to what we're doing with our cybersecurity, because they're coming. And they're either going to rob us blind, or they're going to cripple us and bring us to our knees. And we are the premier country in this world, and we need to stay on top of it and make sure our boys and girls get home off that battlefield when they're protecting us.
Thanks so much. At the outset, it is such an extraordinary honor to share the stage here with Congressman Langevin. I think if we reflect on the last couple of decades of the history of cybersecurity, it is mostly going to be a really sobering story, a story of a trajectory of intrusions that keep getting more and more harmful, a trajectory of our adversaries, both nation states and criminal groups, getting more and more sophisticated, and our nation held more and more at risk. But it's also going to be a story with some real heroes in it. And Congressman Langevin really is one of those heroes who has built the foundation of strong cybersecurity in the US Congress and across our country, and certainly at CISA. I'm sure I speak for our colleagues at DOD and across the executive branch. I'm really grateful for the Congressman's contributions to our shared effort. So thank you, sir. It is really an honor to work with you and share this stage. I'll build a bit on Stacy's points as well as the Congressman's, which is, I think we all understand in this room the velocity at which the risk is increasing. And we are really at this very challenging vertex on a graph where our adversaries, both nation states, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, principally among them, as well as increasingly non-nation state groups that are seeking political or financial ends, are getting more and more sophisticated. The barriers to entry for executing malicious cyber attacks are getting lower, and at the same time, we are increasingly vulnerable. And that's not a great place for us to be. And so the call for all of us is, how do we move ourselves out of this particular position such that a decade from now, or when our children are using technology in the decades to come, we are in a fundamentally different era in cybersecurity. Part of the call to action is the work that Stacy and her colleagues are doing in driving strong requirements across our defense industrial base. But we also need to change the way that we work together. And I'm really taken with a doctrine coming out of our colleagues at Cyber Command called persistent engagement, which is really how we interact with adversary forces in gray and red space. But domestically, we need a similar model, which I'll call persistent collaboration. How do we move to a model where we are not just interacting when something bad happens and there's an intrusion and we all bring in the lawyers and we say, let's look at the contract, and we say, okay, we need to call this person right now and give them this limited data, and then we're going to back off and not work together anymore. That model only favors our adversaries. And so we need an environment, a structure, a culture where we are persistently collaborating between companies through groups like SENEDIA and between the private sector and the government, such that we are continuously working together and sharing information about threats, about risks, about campaigns, about vulnerabilities before something happens, before we have that damaging breach. Because as we all know in cybersecurity, by the time we have that breach and we're getting on the phone and we're calling in your local CISA cybersecurity advisor, your local FBI field office, it's too late. The adversary, in many cases, have already gotten what they're there to get, and we're just doing cleanup. We have to move leftward in that cycle to make sure that we're collaborating before the damage is incurred, before the harm is done to our national security, and really changing that cultural model so that our default is continuous, persistent collaboration and not waiting for something bad to happen. We also need to change our norms and expectations around technology. And an analogy that I really love is for those of us who work in technology, we've grown accustomed to this environment where the first Tuesday of every month we get a whole bunch of flaws and vulnerabilities dropped in our inbox. But here are the big things to fix this month. This would be intolerable in any other domain of society. For those of you who build weapon systems, if you were to email the DOD every month and say, hey, here are all the vulnerabilities that we found in this weapon system in the last month, say, well, we're gonna go find a new provider because this is intolerable. But somehow with commercial software and hardware, we've just accepted this model where ubiquitous vulnerability is okay. And there may be some parts of life where that is, but for national security it isn't. And so we need to shift this model to create this expectation that we expect secure software development. We expect strong testing. We expect resilience. And if there are applications where we don't really care as much, we can have a lower threshold, that's fine. But if it's something where the American people's health, security, and safety is at stake, we need a higher bar. And that's not the government's bar. It's a bar that every American should expect. And so culturally, we need to move away from this model where we accept vulnerability to a model where we expect security and we expect resilience. And that's not something that the government is going to drive top down across the board. It's something where we as a society need to change what we expect from technology and use the forces that all of us bring to bear through procurement, through contract, through purchasing, just through how we interact with technology to really change that course and trajectory that we're on. Now, the Congressman mentioned the Joint Cyber Planning Office, which we've expanded into a Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. At CISA, this is one model where we enable the persistent collaboration that I discussed and help work with the nation's largest technology companies to bring about some of this change. But CISA can't do it alone, the government can't do it alone. It has to be a combined effort with all of us at the table if we're going to drive this change. I'll close by closing actually what the Congressman did with some reflections on where we are in the innovation cycle. Because we're at a, I think, really exciting, although a bit nerve-wracking time in which we have new technologies, AI being, in my opinion, paramount among them, where AI is going to be a commodity technology within years, where it is baked into everything we are doing without us realizing it. And we have some decisions to make today about, do we want to focus on the security and the integrity of the AI systems that we are deploying in every facet of life? Because we can do it now, but now's the time. And if we don't, we're going to make the same mistake as the brilliant engineers of yesteryear who designed the internet, who never expected that we would have well-resourced nation-state militaries attacking the internet. It was designed to communicate across universities. Why would anybody attack it? Well, we know better today. We know that adversaries are going to attempt to undermine, circumvent, diminish the integrity of the AI systems that we're relying on. We can design them to be verifiable, secure, resilient, but we have to make those choices today. We're at a similar point with the post-quantum revolution, where we know that a post-quantum crypto era is coming. We know that it is coming within a matter of years, and we need to prepare today, particularly for those of you in this room who are using cryptography to secure some of our nation's most foundational and critical national security solutions. How do we make sure that, when post-quantum safe cryptography is available, we are postured to rapidly deploy it such that we can get ahead of whatever country is able to cross that post-quantum barrier first. And we know that even if America gets there first, our adversaries will be fast to follow. And so how do we make sure that we are making those investments today such that we are not putting our country at risk in the future? We can get there. We can get to a place where we are in an environment of persistent collaboration. We're in an environment where we change the tolerability of ubiquitous vulnerability, and we're in a place where the technology revolutions that we're on the precipice of today, we're making better decisions with security top of mind than we all made as a society 20 or 30 years ago, but we have to do it together. And so at CISA, across the US government, we are here to partner, we are here to be at the table together, but none of us can do it alone. And so we're looking forward to the work to get there. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank all of our panelists. I think the word that I'm going to take away from this discussion was sobering. And it's an incredibly important set of topics, and thank you very, very much for your leadership and organizing us and teaching us what we need to know, and certainly a problem space that is more than worthy of our best individual and collective efforts. So thank you very, very much. Thank you. So I'm now going to unveil a token of our appreciation for SENEDIA. If I can find them. Here we go. Stacy, thank you very much. On behalf of SENEDIA, thank you very much for supporting SENEDIA, and thank you for your time today and for your expertise and leadership. Thank you very much. And now, as a member of Jim's Wall of Fame, the Dalai Lama and Bono were otherwise occupied. So let me.
I want to know how those others get on the wall. Thank you,
Thanks,
Paul. So before we go to break, I'm not going to go back and talk about my friend Jim, my mentor and former boss's resume and his background and stuff, but just means so much to me personally, the journey we've traveled together over the years. Knew each other as teenagers, came to work for him when he ran for Congress in 2000, stayed with his office through then, and have been close personal friends ever since. And so meaningful to be here and to share time with the Congressman. And one of the things we do at SENEDIA is we award scholarships. Every year we award a few scholarships. This year we've established the James R. Langevin Cybersecurity Scholarship for the first time. In your honor, Congressman. And I believe we're joined by the initial recipient, Jennifer Duque. Jennifer, come up, please. Jennifer just completed her studies at Salve Regina University, is now in the graduate program on cybersecurity, and again is the inaugural recipient of the James R. Langevin Cybersecurity Scholarship from SENEDIA. So Jennifer, congratulations and thank you. And with that, somehow we are only 6 minutes behind schedule. I'm not sure how that happened. So thank you to our panelists. We're going to take a 20-minute break or so. When you come back from break, you'll see that there's a lunch buffet set up outside this room. Please plate up, come in, have a seat, and we'll start the speaking program for the lunch program at 11:30. Thank you.